Right now, a storm is brewing in the used car market, and it's one that could completely reshape the way we buy and sell vehicles for decades to come. Over 4 million used cars are about to flood the market, and this isn't just a ripple, it's a tidal wave. Dealers are drowning in unsold inventory, some already facing the financial collapse that could wipe them off the map. Meanwhile, rental giants and banks are quietly unloading repossessions and lease returns at a scale the industry has never seen before. If you think you're immune to the fallout, think again. This collapse could crush millions of unsuspecting buyers. You might have noticed that used car prices are dropping, but what you don't see is how fast they're plummeting and why. Just last year, a Ford F-250 was worth $64,000, 0 cents. Today, it's worth $53,000, 0 cents, and that price is still sinking. A Honda Accord that once sold for $38,000, 0 cents, is now going for $24,000, 0 cents, if dealers can even move it at that price. But while most people are caught in a downward spiral, there's a small group of smart buyers who are seeing an opportunity like no other. So how did we get here? What caused the unprecedented spike in prices in the first place, and why are they now falling off a cliff? It wasn't just a natural market shift. It was engineered by the biggest players in the automotive world. Three key forces came together over the past few years to artificially inflate the market. First, there was a supply choke caused by chip shortages and production cuts, which made new cars scarce. Second, the Federal Reserve's cheap credit policies flooded the market with loans that buyers couldn't afford. Third, rental giants like Hertz and Enterprise hoarded used cars, competing with everyday consumers and driving prices even higher. In the coming months, we'll see more cars flooding the market than we've seen in years. Lease returns, repossessions, and rental fleet liquidations are about to make a huge impact, driving prices even lower and putting immense pressure on dealers to sell. This is bad news for anyone who bought a car in the last couple of years, especially if they're upside down on their loans. But for the savvy buyer, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. What does this all mean for you? If you know how to navigate this storm, you could walk away with a deal of a lifetime. Cars that were once out of reach will suddenly become affordable, and dealers desperate to move inventory will be fighting for your business. In this video, we'll break down exactly what's happening, why the market is collapsing, and most importantly, how you can take advantage of this crisis to land the best deal on a used car in a generation. The clock is ticking, and if you're smart, you can ride this wave to financial success. Don't wait for the bottom to fall out, it's already here. The storm in the used car market is no longer a distant threat. It has already begun, and the consequences will be far-reaching. Experts are predicting that over 4 million used cars will flood the market in the coming months, a wave of vehicles that will drastically change the landscape for both car buyers and dealers. This isn't just a temporary glitch or a mild correction, it's a complete collapse, one that could rewrite the rules of the auto industry and leave a trail of financial devastation in its wake. For many, the market is already imploding, and for some, it's already too late to avoid the fallout. On top of that, rental giants like Hertz and Enterprise, facing a dramatic drop in business during the pandemic, began hoarding used vehicles to offset their losses. Instead of selling off their fleet as usual, these companies held on to their cars, further reducing the available inventory for the everyday buyer. In 2021, Hertz made the bold move of purchasing 100,000 electric vehicles, betting that the future of car rentals lay in EVs. However, this backfired as EV prices quickly started to fall, and technology outpaced the vehicles they had just bought. By mid-2025, Hertz was forced to sell off 40,000 of these electric vehicles at a loss, further flooding the market with cars that no one was ready to buy. This kind of behavior, when replicated by other rental fleets, only contributed to the swelling inventory of used cars, pushing prices even higher. But the real problem isn't just about a temporary price surge. It's the long-term damage this has done to the car-buying landscape. The average family is now facing a reality where car payments are as high as $733.00 per month. To put this into perspective, that's not far from a mortgage payment in many parts of the country. In some states, buyers are paying more per month for a used car than they would for a new home. As car payments skyrocket, families are being squeezed from all sides, with many buyers now finding themselves upside down on their loans. According to a recent survey, nearly 40% of car owners are now in negative equity, meaning they owe more on their car loans than the vehicle is worth. This means that millions of Americans are locked into vehicles they can't sell or trade in, leaving them stuck with payments they can't afford. As this perfect storm of events has unfolded, the used car market has transformed from a stable and predictable system into a chaotic mess. Prices have been artificially inflated for years, and now, as the floodgates open, those inflated values are coming crashing down. The prices that were once considered normal are now unsustainable. As more and more cars hit the market, dealers are being forced to slash prices just to stay afloat, which is causing a massive downward spiral. Inventory is piling up on dealer lots, and in some cases, cars are sitting for months without moving. A dealership that once turned over inventory in a matter of weeks is now watching as its cars sit idle, racking up daily costs and interest. The result is that dealers are increasingly willing to sell at a loss just to free up space and stop the financial bleeding. For consumers, this means that the deals they've been waiting for are on the horizon. But it's also a sign that the market, as we knew it, is gone forever. In the coming months, we will see the full effects of this artificial collapse. More repossessions, more lease returns, and more rental fleet liquidations will hit the market, all of which will contribute to the largest influx of used vehicles this country has ever seen. The tsunami is already here. The question is, will you be ready to ride the wave to your next car deal? The reasons behind the current collapse in the used car market are complex, but they all stem from strategic decisions made by some of the biggest players in the industry. These decisions were designed to manipulate supply and demand in ways that would ultimately benefit the manufacturers, dealers, and financiers at the expense of the average consumer. The first major factor that triggered this crisis was the sharp drop in new car production. In 2020, the global pandemic caused widespread shutdowns, disrupting manufacturing and making it nearly impossible for automakers to keep up with demand. In fact, some manufacturers reduced their production targets by as much as 40%, despite the demand for new cars remaining strong. This sudden halt in production left dealership lots with fewer new cars, and when those cars were sold, there was nothing to replace them. But the shortage wasn't just due to the pandemic. There were rumors, some even whispered behind closed doors, that automakers deliberately slowed down production as a way to create artificial scarcity. With fewer new cars available, the market for used cars exploded. It was a perfect storm. As new car prices rose, used cars became the only option for many buyers. According to recent reports, by the end of 2023, used car prices had increased by an average of 30% across the board. In some cases, certain models, like the Toyota Tacoma, saw price jumps of up to 50%, with cars that should have sold for $25,000 0 cents suddenly commanding over $37,000 0 cents. In an ideal world, a well-dimensioning used car market would have had healthy competition among dealers, but instead the market was manipulated by another major player, the rental car industry. Rental giants like Hertz and Enterprise found themselves in a tight spot during the pandemic. With travel restrictions and lockdowns in place, the demand for rental cars plummeted. These companies were faced with mounting losses, and many were forced to sell off a portion of their fleets just to stay afloat. Hertz, for example, sold off more than 50,000 cars in 2020 and 2021 to shore up its finances. However, as travel started to pick up again in 2022, these companies found themselves in a new predicament. Without enough cars to meet demand, instead of replenishing their fleets with new vehicles, they turned to used cars, purchasing large quantities at auction. This created a bidding war for used vehicles, driving prices even higher. According to some estimates, rental companies accounted for nearly 30% of all used car purchases in 2022, competing directly with consumers for the same vehicles. The result was that prices soared, making it even harder for regular buyers to afford a car. The final piece of the puzzle was the rise of electric vehicles, EVs. As governments pushed for more green initiatives and automakers scrambled to meet stricter emissions regulations, the market for electric cars skyrocketed. But this led to another complication. The rapid pace of technological advancement in electric vehicles meant that older models began to depreciate much faster than expected. A Tesla Model 3, for example, which sold for $50,000 in 2022, was already worth 20% less by mid-2024. Automakers and dealers struggled to keep up with this rapid depreciation, leaving them with inventory that was harder to sell. Many buyers who had purchased electric vehicles just a year or two earlier were now watching their cars lose value at a pace they never anticipated. While these factors were all contributing to the artificial inflation of the market, one other thing played a significant role: the widespread belief that car prices would only continue to rise. For years, buyers were told that cars, particularly used ones, were valuable assets that could hold or even increase in value. This belief led many to overspend on vehicles, especially in the wake of the pandemic. Buyers took out larger loans, financed cars at higher prices, and pushed themselves into debt, believing that the value of their cars would continue to climb. But now, with the flood of vehicles coming to market, this belief is crumbling. As the market collapses, buyers who were once able to secure high-value cars at inflated prices are now left holding the bag. Their cars are worth significantly less than what they owe, and many are finding themselves stuck with payments they can't afford. These decisions were not random occurrences. They were carefully orchestrated moves by the biggest players in the market. Automakers, lenders, and rental companies all work together to create a perfect storm of inflated prices, over-leveraged buyers, and low supply. The result is a market on the brink of collapse, one where regular consumers struggling to make ends meet are being left behind. But as the storm rages on, there is a glimmer of hope for those who understand the shifting tides. For those who can navigate the mess and recognize the opportunities in this crisis, the fallout from this market collapse could present the best chance to get a great deal in a generation. As we continue to unravel the chaotic collapse of the used car market, it's clear that the crisis extends far beyond just a few overpriced vehicles. For many buyers, the fallout from this collapse has created an impossible financial bind. For dealers, the situation is equally dire. But beneath the surface of this crisis, a few key players are quietly positioning themselves to take advantage of the downturn, leaving others to deal with the consequences of decisions made years ago. The reality for most car buyers today is grim. The average monthly payment for a used car in 2025 has skyrocketed to $733.00. A staggering number, considering that just a few years ago, the average payment was closer to $450.00. This increase in payments has become a financial nightmare for families already struggling with rising costs in nearly every aspect of life. In some parts of the country, this monthly payment is now on par with mortgage payments. For the average American, these soaring prices are impossible to ignore, and many buyers are now stuck in loans that they can't afford. What's worse is that the cars they purchased during the height of the market boom have already lost significant value, sometimes as much as 30% in just a few months. Many people are now in a situation where they owe more on their car than it's worth. This phenomenon, known as negative equity, has become a widespread issue. In fact, over 39% of all car loans in 2025 are now underwater. And for the average person, it's a situation that can feel like being trapped in a never-ending cycle of debt. To put this into perspective, imagine buying a Ford F-250 for $64,000.00 in 2023, only to watch as its value plummets to $53,000.00 by 2025. That's a $11,000.00 loss in just 2 years, and the decline doesn't stop there. The market is expected to continue its downward spiral, leaving millions of buyers holding the bag. This has caused a massive ripple effect, particularly for those who stretched their budgets to make a purchase, hoping that the car's value would rise or at least hold steady. The reality is that these buyers are now facing an asset that depreciates faster than they can keep up with their payments. For many, the only option is to keep paying, watching their equity vanish, or to walk away entirely, often resulting in even worse financial consequences. For the average dealer, the situation is just as bad. Many car dealerships do not actually own the vehicles on their lots. Instead, they finance their inventory through something called floor plan credit, which is essentially a massive revolving loan. This system allows dealerships to stock cars without paying up front, but it also comes with significant costs. Every day a car sits unsold on the lot. It accumulates interest, sometimes as much as $30.00 per vehicle per day. For a dealership with 200 cars on the lot, this can quickly add up to $6,000.00 a day in interest alone. When inventory is moving quickly, dealers don't have to worry about this expense, but in the current market, cars are sitting on lots for months, racking up hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest. This financial burden is forcing many dealerships to make tough decisions, including slashing prices just to stay afloat. For some, this is just the beginning. With over 4 million vehicles expected to flood the market in the coming months, the situation will only worsen. Much of this influx will come from three key sources: repossessions, lease returns, and rental fleet liquidations. These vehicles will be auctioned off, often at prices far below their original value, creating even more downward pressure on the market. In fact, it's estimated that nearly 1.7 million vehicles will be repossessed in 2025 alone. These repossessions are a major contributor to the glut of vehicles in the market, and the numbers are only expected to rise. The average repossession rate is expected to hit the highest level since the fallout from the 2009 financial crisis. With millions of Americans falling behind on their car payments, the repo truck is showing up at driveways across the country. These cars are then auctioned off, often for a fraction of their original value, further driving down prices and putting even more pressure on dealers to sell. With so many cars flooding the auction houses, the competition for buyers is becoming fierce. Dealers who once relied on the steady flow of off-lease and off-rental vehicles are now struggling to compete with the sheer volume of repossessions hitting the market. In fact, a recent report from the National Auto Auction Association indicates that prices for auction vehicles have dropped by as much as 20% in the last 6 months, with no sign of recovery in sight. And it's not just repossessions that are adding to the inventory crisis. Lease returns are also a huge factor. According to the latest data, over 329,000 electric vehicles, EVs, are expected to return to the market in 2026 alone, many of them leased at inflated prices. The influx of electric vehicles, particularly those from manufacturers like Tesla, has created a nightmare for dealers. These cars were leased during a time when demand for EVs was high, and their lease terms were structured based on the belief that these vehicles would retain their value. But with rapid advancements in EV technology and a decline in battery life expectancy, many of these cars are already depreciating much faster than expected. In some cases, EVs that were once worth $50,000.00 are now being sold for less than $35,000.00, leaving dealers to figure out how to move these vehicles in a saturated market. Meanwhile, rental fleet companies like Hertz and Enterprise are also contributing to the glut. After struggling during the pandemic, these companies are now unloading large portions of their fleets. In 2025, it's estimated that rental companies will dump over 2 million cars into the used market. These aren't just old high-mileage vehicles either. Many of these cars are relatively new and in excellent condition. But with so many vehicles flooding the market at once, even well-maintained cars are taking a hit in price. The sheer volume of cars hitting the market is expected to continue for the next several years, further driving down prices and making it difficult for dealers to move inventory. All of this is happening at a time when consumer demand for cars is starting to wane. With interest rates rising, many buyers are choosing to hold off on purchasing a car, waiting for prices to stabilize. The result is a vicious cycle. More cars enter the market, prices drop, and dealers are forced to sell at a loss, all while struggling to stay afloat. It's a financial disaster for the dealers who are still hanging on, but for the informed buyer, it's a golden opportunity. For those who are in a position to buy, the coming months could present the best deals in a generation. As dealers scramble to clear out inventory, buyers will have the upper hand. Prices will continue to fall, and for the first time in years, negotiations will tilt in favor of the buyer. With millions of cars expected to flood the market, the collapse of the used car market is a crisis for many, but a potential windfall for those who know how to capitalize on it. For the savvy and informed buyer, the ongoing collapse of the used car market presents an unprecedented opportunity. As the flood of vehicles continues to grow, the power is shifting into the hands of those who know how to leverage the situation. What was once a seller's market, where buyers were at the mercy of rising prices and limited options, is now becoming a buyer's market. But timing is everything. Those who act quickly and strategically will be able to take advantage of prices that are falling faster than ever before.